Morning.
Buenos días.
Buenos días, Dani. Diana, después de la reunión me llamas para... Estamos coordinando una cosa con Michelle y las reuniones.
Okay.
Morning, Julian.
Good morning, good morning.
Morning, Julian.
How you doing, Miguel?
Fine. How are yourself? How's the fishing doing?
Everything's been okay.
Great, great.
Everything's been okay. Weather has been a little choppy, but fishing hasn't been too bad.
That's good to hear.
Sales are good.
By the way, Julian, as you know, this meeting is only for Michelle's presentation. So all the questions should be channeled through you or directly to her. You decide how to let people talk. And then Natalia, myself, and Graciela here will help you with the chat so people can ask for a turn to speak.
No problem.
Okay.
So what we're discussing today is the 5-year strategic plan.
Yes. We expect to go over that with you, with St. Croix and with Puerto Rico. And then after the council meeting, we may have another meeting. Michelle is going to announce that. So the DAPs will have ample time to make sure that their concerns, their ideas, suggestions are included in the strategic plan. So we're talking about maybe having a meeting early June sometime. She and I will talk about it during the meeting today.
All right, that sounds great.
Okay.
That sounds good. And what's the dates for the council meeting again?
27th, 28th of April.
Okay.
And then you have the DAP has the 19th and the 20th.
The 19, yeah, 19th.
Yours is 19 at 10 o'clock. And San Croix 1 o'clock that day, followed by Puerto Rico on the 20th, 10 o'clock.
Okay. And what are we going to be discussing at that one is the eco-based management plans, correct?
Yeah. And if by that time we have any news about the island-based FMPs, Maria Del Mar will bring it up. But also we should start considering in each area possible amendments. For example, St. Thomas and John may want to exclude or include particular species that are of importance to your areas, and Croix will do the same. So Maria del Mar asked us to give her some suggestions last year, and she took some from you and from St. Croix, and I believe Puerto Rico too. So that's what we are going to discuss on April 19, 20.
Okay. And then another question I have, Virginia Chevette and her counterpart submitted a proposal requesting some funding to do a study on the lane snapper. Do I bring that to the table at the council meeting?
No, we are working with them, but it should be them. If you want to bring it, fine, at the council meeting.
Well, I don't know if it had to go before a vote of the council to see if we can get the funding to do that project, to do the stock assessment of the lane snapper.
Because
So I didn't know how it all works out.
well, no, if they, because they are working also with Puerto Rico Laboratory, and I told them, that if they get the okay with them, just send us the cost. If you send the $10,000, we can do it.
Well, I think it was more than that. She said that the last email that she sent that she didn't receive response back from you.
Well, if I told her if it's more than that money, we cannot do that because we don't have money for programmatic funding. They have to go back to the grants officer. But let me check with her again, and I'll be back to you so we can plan to present this to the council.
Because we really want to get this going,
Yes.
so we can make a decision on what to do with that seasonal closure, because we feel that it's not necessary, but um, with all what's going on and what's coming up with this other request from the new president, it's going to be all interesting.
Yeah. And I believe her work is excellent. We want to pursue not only that, but other speeches that she has on the back burner, because the student or PhD guy who's working with her contacted us, and they have been working with the fishery laboratory because they have the equipment to do the slicing of the otolith and all that.
Yes, they've been working together. It's been very good. And actually, when we did the first CETA meeting on the queen triggerfish, they were very pleased with all that she presented.
Yeah, they are very good.
So
Personally, I would like to support them all the way we can, because that's the kind of work that we need in the U.S. Caribbean.
yeah, and she
And that
works
can-
well with the fishers. So she works very well with the fishers, and
Yes.
and gets them involved. So I've been involved with them for a while,
Mhm.
Tony and some of the other fishers. So
That's key to any work that we are going to do and that we're doing now. So yeah, I'm making a note here to contact her again just to make sure that we are all on the same page, and I will let you know immediately what comes out of the discussion.
okay, so another question before we start here in a few minutes, with the last email that you sent about the 30% reduction from
Mhm.
the president, I see that you guys want to form a separate committee to deal with that. Will we be working on that committee at the council meeting?
No, it's something that Marcos is going to talk to each one of you, and we were thinking have 3 members of the council, the chairs of the DAPs, sit down and put together something that could be included in the letter. If you look at the presidential executive order, the 30 by 30 is the Department of Interior's responsibility. What we are going to discuss at the council meeting and what NEMS is doing is going over 216C, which is the paragraph that asks information from the fishers and the councils. The other one, I sent an email some time ago to all of you, just in case anybody wants to send an email directly to the appropriate people in the Department of Interior before April 2nd. That was the deadline that they gave. But when you send, for example, Marco send his comments, they send an email back. Thank you for your comments on 216C. They didn't touch A. The reason for that is that NOAA is working with the Department of Interior, but the National Fisheries Service task is to work with 216C. Paul Duramos, the acting regional administrator, not a regional, assistant administrator for National Marine Fisheries Service, is going to talk about it at the meeting on the 27th.
Okay.
But the key part, Julian, is that and I went through this with the fisheries a long time ago also. You have to be mindful about this kind of things, because if, for example, they decided to expand to comply with 30%, any of the areas that you have in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, fishers are not included in those areas that they call monuments or parks or sanctuaries or whatever. So the other councils and industry people, what they're saying is, okay, fine, 30-30, but we need to take in consideration the areas that have been closed already. But they don't want to, do not include the areas that have been closed for fishery purposes, which is the other thing that we're talking about. The memo that I sent all of you, if you go and click the Marine Protected Area webpage, you will see a map of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands that does not include Grammatic Bank, the MCD, Bao, the Seaco, the areas that have been closed for fishery purposes. So, and that's
Okay.
what I thought. That's what I thought. Asked Marcos to put together this little committee and work on it, and maybe have a phone call or a Zoom call this week or next.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think we should do a phone call and discuss it so everyone can be on the same page, because right now, everybody seems to be on the opposite page,
Oh yeah.
or they asking questions and don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I myself just want to be cleared that when I speak to the fishers, that I can tell them the right thing and not the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So
That's what I sent that memo, because the executive order are complex,
close
and
up.
we need to concentrate on the things that they want from us.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 8 to 10 o'clock. I have already 11 people, but we don't have a quorum yet.
Yeah. I have two individuals that I know of that are not gonna be here today. So,
Okay.
and then we have one to replace.
Can you send an email to us about possible replacements?
Yeah, well, I wanted the committee today. I wanted to bring it up in other business today and see if the committee has a recommendation of anyone that needs to be replaced.
Great. So when we open, please include that in, announce for the record. In other meetings, we are going to talk about possible replacements, so we can take it to the council meeting on the 27th.
Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing.
Good morning.
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 Saludos a todos y a todas. Hello, everyone. Good morning. David here.
Morning, David.
Good morning. It's Michelle.
Morning, Michelle. Michelle, I just made you a co-host, so you can present on your computer.
Thanks, Miguel. I'll wait to share my screen until,
10 o'clock.
yeah.
Okay.
Buenos días a todos.
Bueno, yeah, what's up?
Good morning, good morning. Buenos días.
Good morning.
Morning, Cristina.
Well, good morning to all. It's 10 o'clock right now. Can we give a 10-minute grace period? Let's see if anyone else is gonna join.
Okay, so we start at 10:10.
Yeah, because right now, presently, I have Elton George, who's out on a family emergency, and I have Lance, who has asked to be excused because he also had an emergency and had to fly out to Atlanta, medical related. So I got two. I'm not sure if anyone else is canceling. Everybody else told me they were going to be here today. Winston, can you tell me if Gregory's going to come on today?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't talk to him.
Okay, le chequeé, me dice por texto.
Can you give him a call for me, please? Because every time I call, I lose the meeting.
Okay. Okay, I'll try.
Thanks. I know Daryl is trying to get on and he's having trouble. He's asking for the call-in number right now.
Natalia, ¿puedes poner el número en el screen por si acaso?
Thank you, Miguel.
Okay.
El número de la reunión, Miguel.
Sí. Copiado es del register.
Bueno.
Es el número de teléfono.
Good morning, Gary. Corky.
Hello, can you hear me?
Who's this?
This is Darrell Bryan.
Hey, we can hear you very clear. Hey,
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Corky, can you hear me? Gary.
Diana, déjalo porque te interrumpe acá. Empezamos en 10 minutos.
¿A esto es lo que te referías, Miguel? Miguel, is this the information that you wanted on screen?
Gary Rogers here. Gary Rogers here.
Okay, Gary, this is the St. Thomas meeting. Your meeting is at 1 o'clock, but you still want to participate this morning?
Hi, Miguel. Okay.
Hey, Julian, Colin just logged. Julian?
Yes, thank you, Ruth. I was texting Matthew. Matthew said that he's logged on also, but I'm not seeing his name there.
Good morning,
Oh, his
Julian.
name is-
My name is
All right,
Gilbert.
okay, it just showed up. It
Okay.
just showed up.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, guys. So I think the only one that we're missing to hear from is Gregory. So we can start in 4 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 10:10. I'd like to start the DAP meeting. Today is March 29th, 2021. Time now is 10:10 a.m. And today on the agenda, we will be discussing the 5-year strategic plan. And if anyone has any items that they would like to add into other business, this is the opportunity to do so. But before we start that, can we do a roll call, Miguel?
Yes. Natalia, can you read the names?
Yeah, do you want me to stop and to the people to present themselves after
Or
I?
just go over all the names that you have, and then the people on the phone can introduce themselves.
Okay, I have here Miguel Rolón, Michelle Dual, Julia Magras, Colin, Cristina Hollande, David Ortiz, Diana Martino, Elizabeth Gaddison, Gilbert, Graciela García Moliner, Jose A. Rivera, Liaja Rivera, Madeline, Marcos Hanke, Nicole Angeli, Orion Tadik, Ruth Gomez, Wilson Santiago, and Winston Lede. I have here some guests with numbers. If you can identify yourself, please. If I miss anybody.
Darrell Bryan for St. Thomas DAP.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody else?
Anybody else on the phone that would like to introduce yourself?
I see one other number, but that person is not identifying themselves. Okay, well, we will move forward.
Julian, Julian, you also wanted to include something else in your.
Yes, I'm gonna add that right now. In other business for this afternoon, right now we have one empty seat that needs to be filled, and we will discuss that at that time. Also, Elton George, like I said earlier, asked to be excused, and also Lance asked to be excused for this meeting because of medical reasons. So with that said, is there anyone that has anything that they would like to add to the agenda for today?
Just one observation. Any member of the DAP that is on the phone should identify yourself for the record so we can send you the compensation for this meeting.
Okay, well, no one else is saying anything. Can I have a motion? Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I need a second.
Darrell Bryan, second.
All right, is everyone in favor? Is there any abstains or any noes? Not seeing anything in the chat. So with that said, can we move forward with the presentation from Michelle Duval?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me just a minute to share my screen here.
Take your time.
Okay, are you seeing my screen, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Let me just put this in presentation mode for you. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the St. Thomas, St. John District Advisory Panel. We're here today to review the draft framework for the strategic plan. And our goal here today is to obtain your input and feedback on the draft island-specific objectives under each of the major goal theme areas. So just a little overview of what I plan to cover today. So first, I'm just going to give a brief review of what the different components of a strategic plan are. Then I'm going to talk about the sources of information that went into the development of both the draft vision, mission, and goal statements, and the draft island-specific objectives. I'll give a quick review of the general organization and structure of the strategic plan, and then we will get into the review of the objectives. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would like to go entirely through the presentation, and then after that, circle back and get the advisory panel's feedback on the draft objectives, if that's okay.
Yes, I totally agree. That's the way we need to do it. So if anyone has any questions, please make a note. And then after Ms. Duval is finished, we will come back and go to everyone individually and get your comments or questions and get it all completed. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, I just wanted to quickly review, what are the components of a strategic plan? So there are 5 major components. The vision is really the desired future state an organization would like to achieve. So that's meant to be very aspirational. The mission is really the fundamental purpose or focus of an organization and sort of how it approaches achieving its vision. Goals are meant to be broad outcomes. These are not things that are necessarily measurable, but they are requirements to help an organization achieve its vision. Objectives are meant to be specific, often measurable targets that are that can be thought of as mini steps or a subset of the goals. And then strategies, which we haven't really talked about much previously, are the how. They are how an organization will actually meet one of its objectives. And just to illustrate these in practice, this is an example that I showed the council before. So this is an example that was put together by the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council. So the problem is I'm tired, I'm grumpy, and my pants don't fit. And so my vision is that I look and feel fabulous. And as part of that, my goal is to get healthy. And to get to achieve this goal, I've set 3 objectives. So these are very specific objectives, and they can be measurable, but my 3 objectives are to exercise more, to eat better, and to lower my stress. And in order to do that, I'm going to employ the following strategies. So my strategies for exercising more are to jog 3 times a week, do yoga twice a week, and take the stairs. My strategies to achieve my objective of eating better are to make dinner at home 5 times a week instead of going out, to reduce my consumption of red meat, and to increase my vegetables. And similarly, my strategies to achieve my objective of lowering my stress are to do yoga a couple times a week and spend more time with my dog. So in the context of the council, these various components would be, for the vision, what does the council want U.S. Caribbean fisheries to look like in the future? The mission is really the council's mandate for management under the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And the goals are the big picture focus areas. So these really describe the ultimate impact of the council's work and are necessary to achieve its vision. And then the objectives, as we talked about before, these are specific, they're observable, they describe intended results, and can be directly linked to an issue or problem or several issues or problems. And then finally, the strategies, again, are the approaches that the council will take to meet its objectives. And so now I just want to quickly review the sources of information that I use to develop these draft objectives, as well as the draft vision and mission statements and goal statements. So the first was the council vision statement brainstorming session. So this actually happened way back in August of 2019 in the before COVID. So that was input that the council provided, and the directive was for me to go back and develop 3 to 5 different vision statement alternatives for the council to consider down the road. The second major piece of input is the stakeholder input report. So this is something that you all contributed to. Late last summer, in late August and early September, the district advisory panels, the outreach and education advisory panel, and the council provided feedback and prioritization of sort of top 5 issues among 4 different issue areas, which I'll show on the next slide. Also part of that stakeholder input report was management partner outreach. So input from the council's management partners, the NOAA fisheries and the territorial governments. And then we also had a public comment form that we received some feedback on as well. And then the other piece of information I used was the island-based fishery management plans. And so you all spent a lot of time developing the goals and objectives for those island-based fishery management plans. And so I pulled on that information in the development of goals and objectives here. And so just to review, these were the different stakeholder and public input discussion themes. We had 4 of them, which were management and operational issues, resource health, social, cultural, and economic issues, and communication and outreach. And so before we get into these, I just wanted to offer some general observations. So within each of these 4 themes, there were quite a few overlaps in the priority issues that were identified by the DAPs and the council. And so this has resulted in very similar and in some cases identical island-specific objectives. And I think if you think back to the development of the goals and objectives for the island-based fishery management plans, there's actually a good bit of overlap. And in some cases, there are, some identical goals and identical objectives among all of the 3 plans. The other thing that I wanted to note is that, many of the priority issues that you all discussed back at the end of last year are more appropriately addressed as island-specific strategies. So in other words, the how you're going to meet those objectives, or as activities as part of an implementation plan. And then the other thing I just wanted to make note of is that, really ultimately, all of the US Caribbean island districts are really working towards the same broad goals. And that leads me to the general structure of the plan, which I'm showing using this schematic here. So we'll have one vision and one mission for the council, and then we'll have these 4 different goal themes of management, ecosystem and resource health, social, cultural, and economic issues, and communication and outreach. And for each of these different goal areas, with the exception of communication and outreach, we will have a set of island-specific objectives and associated strategies. So for example, Puerto Rico will have a series of objectives that are specific to management, ecosystem and resource health, and social, cultural, and economic issues. And each objective will have strategies associated with it. Similarly for St. Thomas and St. John, and again for St. Croix. With respect to communication and outreach, these objectives will apply to the council as a whole, so to the entire US Caribbean jurisdiction. I think if you'll recall, we did not prioritize those issues when we talked about them. Everybody agreed that communication and outreach issues were extremely important to all of the island districts overall. So that's why those objectives will apply jurisdiction-wide. And so the current steps, what we're trying to do here today is today and tomorrow, the district advisory panels will review and provide feedback on the draft island-specific objectives for each of the themes. And just a couple reminders that, objectives should be broad enough to include similar categories of strategies and issues, but we also want to make sure that they're specific enough to be observable. And then I have also included on some extra slides potential strategies for each of the draft objectives that are really based on your discussions, the stakeholder input report, and are intended for illustration. And we'll take a quick look at those when we get your feedback. But really my intent, and I've spoken to the executive director, is that we would set up separate meetings for the district advisory panels to review and provide feedback on draft strategies at a later date. So after the April council meeting, we'll probably be looking maybe sometime early June to set up another series of district advisory panel meetings. And so the other thing I want to note is that I've also provided the draft vision, mission, and goal statement alternatives here for informational purposes. But at its April 27th and 28th meeting, the council will be reviewing and selecting, one of those alternatives and approving those as part of the overall draft plan, along with the objectives that you'll be reviewing here today. So I'm just going to show you the draft vision and mission alternatives. So these are the different vision alternatives, and each one of these really speaks to the brainstorming that the council did, talking about maintaining, healthy ecosystems, sustainable island communities, sustainable island fisheries, supporting local communities, providing cultural, social, and economic benefits. And so each one of these alternatives, tries to encompass that in a slightly different way. So the first alternative is healthy coral reef ecosystems, sustainable island fisheries, and thriving resilient fishing communities. The second is a slight twist on that. It's healthy island ecosystems that support sustainable and resilient local fisheries and fishing communities, followed by thriving and resilient island ecosystems, fisheries, and fishing communities that provide cultural, social, and economic benefits for all. And then healthy island ecosystems and sustainable resilient fisheries that provide cultural, social, and economic benefits for all. So these will be what the council will be looking at their meeting in April. And then for the mission statement, this first sentence that you see up here in white, this is really, that sentence doesn't change in the three different alternatives that I'm showing you. And that sentence reads, the Caribbean Fishery Management Council conserves, restores, and manages fishery resources in the US Caribbean consistent with the requirements of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. And so this is, you might recognize this sentence from the council's website, from its tagline. And so just the blue sentence is where the different alternatives come into play. So, you know, in this first one, what we're doing, remember, the mission statement is the council's purpose for being and sort of how its general approach for achieving its mission. So each one of these sentences speaks to, you know, stewardship of marine resources and ecosystems, and using collaboration and stakeholder input, education and outreach. And then I'm just going to flip to the next one here. You know, and then another alternative, again, advancing stewardship of fisheries and ecosystems through stakeholder outreach, education, and collaboration. And one thing I just wanted to note is, I think some definitions of the words conserve, restore, and manage. And so sometimes conservation is often mistaken for preservation, and that's not what the council's mission is. The council's mission with respect to conservation is to really avoid wasteful or destructive use of marine resources. You know, restoration is to, you know, bring back into existence or use. And then management is really about treating with care and, you know, exercising good stewardship and supervisory direction. And so now we'll get into the different goal themes. So the first one of these is management. And again, you know, I drew upon the different goal statements that you all developed as part of your development of the island-based fishery management plan. So, you know, these three different goal statement alternatives speak to, you know, management strategies or approaches that really provide for healthy and sustainable fisheries and fishing communities. And one of the important things that came through in all of those different goals was also reflecting, you know, local ecosystem productivity and considering the needs of island fishing communities. So these are three different alternatives that try to capture those thoughts. And so now we're going to get into the draft island specific objectives. So some of you may recall, this is a chart that I showed to the council at its December council meeting. So this is a table of the different management and operational issues that you all discussed during our alternative approach meetings in August. And the yellow highlights indicate issues that were selected as one of the top 5 priorities by all 3 of the advisory panels, as well as the council, and the ones in gray were selected by at least 3 of the bodies. And I think what I want to point out here is that there's a lot of overlap within those selection of the top 5 issues. So again, as I said to earlier, that will lead to similarities in objectives. And so now we'll get into the St. Thomas, St. John draft management objectives. So for each one of these, I've noted that there are, you know, a number of like 4 or 5 or 3 potential strategies that I've also tried to develop, which we will see in a little bit after I finish going through the presentation. But the first of these is support the development of accurate, timely, and cost-effective data collection, reporting, and monitoring programs. And so this district advisory panel had a pretty robust discussion about the need for catch reporting, you know, how this is currently voluntary for the recreational sector, you know, and even though this reporting the importance is emphasized, you know, there are sometimes issues with fishers reporting on time, the need for, you know, to improve the quality and timeliness of data. And so we want to make sure that this objective is broad enough to speak to all types of data needs that the council might have. So this is not just about catch reporting, but also fishery independent data collection and monitoring programs and fishery dependent programs like sampling programs. The next objective is to promote fisher involvement and other collaborative research approaches to meeting island-specific science and information needs. And so again, you all had a good discussion about the need to incorporate fishers in the development of the science and information that's used in decision making. And so one of the things that you all had a very robust discussion about was the closed seasons and closed areas and stock assessments for those. And so, one of the strategies within this objective would be to encourage collaborative studies on the effectiveness of Germanic Bank and other closed areas, and similarly for closed seasons. So I just wanted to give a little context for that objective. The next is ensure that management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement. So again, enforcement of existing regulations was a priority that was selected by all three of the district advisory panels. The next draft objective is collaborate with domestic and international partners to promote adaptive and efficient management that considers diverse community interests. So this is drawn a little bit more from some of the draft goals and objectives within your island-based fishery management plan, which included that type of domestic and international collaboration, and also ensuring that that management is adaptive, it's efficient, and that community needs are being incorporated as part of that decision-making process. And then finally, one of the last objective is consider the potential impacts of climate change on the efficacy of management measures. So that was one of the priorities that was selected by the St. Thomas, St. John District Advisory Panel. This could be something that could potentially be included as more of a strategy under the objective to collaborate with partners to promote adaptive and efficient management as well. So just something to think about. Now we're going to get into, this is the ecosystem and resource health goal alternatives. So you all have been spending a lot of time on the development of your fishery ecosystem plan and conceptual models as well. So we want to make sure that we incorporate that work into this goal. So all of these goal statements are about ensuring, supporting uses that are ecologically sustainable, and also ensure that we have healthy and resilient marine resources, and that the very unique island ecosystem structure that exists around all three of the island platforms in the US Caribbean is maintained. So 3 different ways of saying this. And again, the council will be selecting one of these as an alternative at its meeting at the end of April. But again, these all deal with, ensuring and advancing ecosystem-based approaches that, can support healthy and resilient fisheries, as well as, ensuring local ecological productivity, structure, and function. And so again, this is the same chart that I showed folks in December at the December council meeting. And again, similar highlighting of the different top 5 priority issues that were discussed for St. Thomas, St. John. These included enforcement, habitat loss and destruction, and creation and rehabilitation, coastal development, erosion and sedimentation, and lack of biological or ecosystem information. But still, there was some overlap, certainly, between the 3 different district advisory panels. And so these are the draft ecosystem and resource health objectives. So because we want to make sure we capture the work that you all are doing on the fishery ecosystem plan, the first one of these is to implement the fishery ecosystem plan as a roadmap for future council actions to maintain the ecological relationships, roles, and services of the St. Thomas and St. John Island ecosystem. And again, this is really speaking to the work that you guys have done and continue to do on the fishery ecosystem plan. And so, this also, I also want to point out that, this objective can also include strategies to evaluate existing spawning season closures and closed areas such as Germanic Bank and Hind Bank to determine their contributions to ecosystem integrity. So that's just an illustration of how, the discussions that you all have had feed into these objectives and potential strategies. The next objective is to identify, manage, and protect coral reef and other fishery resource habitats of St. Thomas and St. John. And so again, you all had a very robust discussion about things like coastal development, pollution, sedimentation and erosion, and how all of those are impacting habitats that are important for the council's managed resources, and that a lot of those are actually subsets of similar things. And so that's why these would be incorporated within an objective speaking to identifying, managing, and protecting those habitats. So just as an example, one strategy could be to develop outreach materials on the impacts of habitat loss from non-fishing related activities, as well as develop council habitat policies that address things like sedimentation and erosion. The next objective here is encourage efforts to create and rehabilitate fishery resource habitats that support ecosystem structure and function. So again, this is about the conversation that you all had that that habitat loss and destruction kind of go hand in hand with habitat creation and restoration. And so, again, just an example of a potential strategy would be, to explore opportunities for funding from NOAA's marine debris removal program, as well as working with federal and territorial management partners to identify opportunities for habitat enhancement. So just a couple examples there. The next draft objective is collaborate with management partners to address enforcement concerns that may affect ecological relationships. So again, enforcement was one of the top five objectives that you all selected. And so that's what this particular objective is speaking to. A potential strategy there would be to conduct outreach with the NOAA Office of Law Enforcement, as well as DPNR enforcement regarding impacts of illegal fishing activities on fishery resources and habitats. So just an example there. And then finally, the last draft objective is collaborate with science partners to identify and address ecological data and information gaps. So again, making sure that you have the information that you all need to make decisions. So, collaborating with academic partners to identify and fill in those gaps. And this objective also speaks to NOAA Fisheries ecosystem-based fishery management and implementation plans. So there are a number of things in there that would pertain to this as well. And so now we're going to move on to the social, cultural, and economic goal statement alternatives. So, these try to capture the fact that there are unique characteristics to island fishing communities, and that the council wants to promote fair and equitable resource use. So again, all three of these alternatives really drew from the goals and objectives that you all identified within the island-based fishery management plans. And so this is again the chart of the sort of top 5 issues that were identified by all of the district advisory panels, as well as the council. And again, you can see highlighted in yellow issues that were selected as top 5 issues by all 4 groups, and then in gray by 3 of the groups. So again, there's quite a bit of overlap in priorities among these social, cultural, and economic issues. And so to get into the draft objectives, the first is to promote the collection of social and economic data that informs management decisions. I think one of the one of the priorities that was identified by all three of the district advisory panels was a lack of social and economic data. So a potential strategy here could be to use the results from socioeconomic impact studies like those being conducted or finished on hurricanes Irma and Maria, as well as the COVID-19 assessments that are going on. The next draft objective is evaluate the social, cultural, and economic impacts of management decisions and actions across user groups. This would include things like, documenting the social or economic impacts of the existing closed seasons and spawning areas on commercial, for hire, and recreational stakeholders. So again, that issue of the closed seasons and spawning areas, it spans all of these different goal areas with respect to, science and management approaches, as well as social, cultural, and economic impacts. The next draft objective is to promote efforts that support social and economic opportunity and stability across sectors and fishing communities. And so, one of the conversations that folks had was specific to St. Thomas, St. John, was infrastructure needs. So one of the potential strategies could be to support community efforts to improve fishing infrastructure, including landing and market sites across St. Thomas and St. John. And then the final draft objective here is to consider the impacts of enforcement and illegal fishing on economic opportunity and social well-being. So again, the discussion that you all had about the impacts of illegal and unlicensed commercial fishers and lack of enforcement, led to the development of this particular objective. So, one of the potential strategies is to, work with management partners to determine where additional enforcement could improve economic conditions or trust among user groups, as well as collaborating with science partners to document what the economic impacts of illegal or unlicensed sales might be. And then finally, we're moving on to the last area, which is the communication goal alternatives. And so, we have three here that are focused on sort of three major things. We're focused on, educating and conducting outreach to audiences, focused on different types of communication tools that can be used, and then also increasing participation in the council process. So that's what each of these three alternatives tries to speak to, is engaging, educating, and informing audiences to improve their public understanding and participation in the council process. And this is just a reminder of the different issues that we talked about during our meetings back in late August and early September. So we talked about the frequency of communication and how we get alerts or reminders of scoping meetings and council meetings. We talked about the variety of tools used in communication, both traditional media as well as social media. And then we also talked about improving general public awareness of fisheries issues, expanding communications to other types of groups, including non-traditional groups which the council has been very engaged in. We talked a lot about trying to resume in-person outreach workshops on important topics. We talked a lot about the clarity and simplicity of presentations and how that's really important to make people feel comfortable about participating in the process as well. And then finally, we had quite an extended discussion about expanding the role of fisheries liaisons, on the sort of beyond the outreach and economic advisory panel to, try to increase public understanding and discussion. And so, the takeaway here was that all these topics were important, that more communication and outreach is needed, both generally as well as for specific groups and areas, that the variety of communication tools really needs to consider generational preferences. And then, as well as having a big focus on improving general public awareness of fisheries issues. And so these are the draft communication and outreach objectives. Now, there are only 3 of them, but there are a lot of potential strategies within each of these 3 objectives. So the first objective, use a variety of communication tools that consider the social, cultural, and economic characteristics of target audiences. This is really focused on what are the tools that the council is using, and are there other tools that we can consider? The second objective, promote participation of a variety of stakeholders in the council process, is exactly that. It's about participation. And then the final objective is about the education and outreach component. So improve public and stakeholder understanding and awareness of fisheries management, current issues, and the council process. And I do have some, additional slides that detail some of the potential strategies within each of these 3 objectives that are all based on the discussions that you have had, as well as the other district advisory panels and the council. And so, now for your feedback, I think the question is really, are the draft island-specific objectives specific enough, yet comprehensive enough to incorporate the range of priority issues for each island district? And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I am going to make this a little bit smaller. And then I do have extra slides that we can use to go back and review each of the different draft management objectives, some of the example or potential strategies that we might be considering down the road during these other meetings that we'd be looking to have in June.
Thank you very much. That was a well-detailed and well put together presentation. My first question would be, with each of the sections where you have alternatives, is one alternative going to be picked, voted on by the council, voted on by each committee, or how is this going to work? So the group can understand the process.
Right. So you're talking about like these vision statement alternatives and the mission statement alternatives and the goal area alternatives. Yes. So I'm going to defer to Miguel, who's also on this call as well. But the thought was that the council would be voting and selecting, one of these alternatives as a draft vision statement, a draft mission statement, and, draft goal statements for each of those areas. I do want to emphasize that everything is draft until final approval, which will not come until, after we have all of the objectives and strategies outlined and the public has an opportunity to comment on it. But I think it will be the council that will be voting on the selection of one of these alternatives. But I would also defer to Miguel if he'd like to add anything else.
You're totally right. What the council decided was to consult with especially with the DAPs, make sure that we understand the DAP's concerns for each one of the areas. This strategic plan will never work unless we are all in agreement with the things that we need to do in the next 5 years. So that's the way it's going to operate. Out of this meeting, Dr. Duval is going to present to the council a summary of your contributions to this exercise. And then the council will take note and decide, to accept or not accept the recommendations. And then probably, this is going a little bit ahead, but we may have to have another meeting in June after the council goes through all this and make sure that the DAPs receive a feedback on each of your suggestions and recommendations.
Okay, well said. So I like the group to have their opinions brought forward and what they feel about each one of the alternatives, what's a preferred alternative. So if we can do this like what we did at the last meeting, and we can go slide by slide and move from there, or we can pick one and say, well, we all agree on this. So I'm open up for suggestions.
Julian, if I may, I
Yes.
believe the last suggestion that you made probably will be easier. We can go with what Dr. Duval have done is that she picked every meeting that we had before with the DAP, St. Thomas and John, and the others too. And she offered here suggestions for you to consider. So you may say, well, after I have read this, the group agrees, but also we want to add 1, 2, or 3. And that way she will be able to compile all the suggestions for the group. And for the group, please try to talk as the chair asks you to, so we won't leave anybody out.
Great. So which would be the first slide? We're going to start with the one that's on the screen right now.
That's what I was thinking, Mr. Chairman. I mean, unless folks have, any specific comments on the, the vision and mission and goal statement alternatives, but I really need your input on these draft island specific objectives, because this is the piece where, the unique characteristics and needs of each island platform will be addressed.
Julian, one important part is remember that from the presentation of Dr. Duval, an objective is something that you are able to set and measure. And that's why it's so important, because the goals and big missions, we all agree on that one. But how we do it, here's what the nitty-gritty of the whole thing, when the rubber meets the road. We need to go through these objectives. And the question to you is really, do you think that this is something that we should do or we can do? How we measure that? And that's what Dr. Duval needs. So for example, ensure the management measure and encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement. Potential strategy for this: coordinate with NOAA, Office of Legal Enforcement, USVI Department of Natural Resources to review enforceability of existing regulations. Suppose cross-training of enforcement personnel, identify enforcement. This is something that pans out of your previous exercises where you identify enforcement as one of your top priorities. So here, probably what we need to hear from you is that if you agree with any of these potential strategies, do you agree with the whole thing? Do you need to add something else? And I would suggest that we take it one at a time and we can read it for the record. And especially it should be read by the chair for the record, and you then control the discussion.
Okay. Hold on 1 second for me. Let's get in my glasses here so I can see. So the first one that is up on the screen is the draft management objectives, and there's 3 different headings. Ensure the management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement. Then you have the collaborative with the domestic and international partners to promote adaptive and efficient management that considers diverse community interests, and then
Chair,
consider. Yes?
I believe we need to go one by one. Let's just go one by one. If the first one
Okay.
is enforcement, let's do it one by one, because we're having to process each objective. So let's do one, discuss it, move to the next one. That always seems to work best for this group. That's just my
Okay.
suggestion.
All right, that's great. Thanks for your suggestion. So the first one is ensure the management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement. How
But
does everyone feel with this statement?
you can, it's not
Yes.
that what we need to hear from what we need to hear from you is we need to, I can do it. I can do it. It's what we need to hear from the group is whether you agree or not with the potential strategy, which is coordinate with NOAA Office of Legal Enforcement and U.S. Department of Planning and Natural Resources to review the enforceability of existing regulations, support cross-training of enforcement personnel, identify enforcement gaps in existing St. Thomas and John regulations, and promote development of clear, understandable compliance guides for stakeholders. And this is something that came out of your previous suggestion. So what we need to hear is whether we have captured your concern, your suggestion under this objective. So the first question will be to hear from the group whether you believe that that we need to coordinate with NOAA Office of Legal Enforcement and U.S. Department of Planning and Resources to review the enforceability of 16 regulations.
So can I just jump in from a little bit, Miguel? So I just want to emphasize that these are potential strategies. These are not set in stone. So we want to have another meeting to talk about these, but this reflects discussion that you've had, like Miguel said. So does this objective ensure that management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement? Is that specific enough yet broad enough to cover the concerns that you all have expressed and the priorities that you all have expressed?
Mr. Chair, this is Ruth. Here's how I
Yes, go ahead, Ruth.
this. We say this all the time, and we all know that we can sit here, we can come up with every management strategy, but it's only as good as its enforcement. So when I look at this, I know that we have a lot of issues with DPNR and enforcement. We know the impeccable job that the federal arm does. So we need to bring the two together, right, in order to get DPNR up to speed, right, and sort of change the way they look at enforcement to match what the feds do. So you have to merge these two together. So when I read the potential strategy of getting to where I want, which is to have the best enforcement, and nothing is ever 100% proof. I think what is listed underneath here to coordinate with NOAA, with DPNR, and to support cross training, because as a old park ranger, boat patrol law enforcement ranger, right? You are only as good as your training and the knowledge that you present. I think we ask too much of DPNR and they don't really get the best training. So we need to partner with NOAA. So I agree with the potential strategies that are below here. I think that kind of sums up all that we need in order to get the best enforcement. Because I truly believe sometimes we ask too much of DPNR enforcement with their limited arm, and NOAA can provide, their law enforcement section can provide a whole lot of guidance and training to them. So I agree with it.
Thank you, Ruth, for your comments. Daryl?
I kind of agree with it. I mean, the little bit of enforcement that we do have is always on the commercial sector. So my concern would be that if NOAA gets involved, it will be more enforcement on the commercial guys again, and less on the recreational and the other guys who are fishing illegally. That's my only concern. I mean, because it says about existing laws. I mean, the Virgin Island doesn't have any laws about recreational fishing and stuff. So something needs to be done about that sector versus the commercial, always getting the rules and regulations. So now we're going to, if we ask NOAA to come in, we're actually doing a double enforcement on the same guys that's complaining that we're tired of DPNR harassing us. Meanwhile, the other guys out there fishing illegally. I mean, that's That's the only thing I see that's a little. I mean, it sounds good to me. I mean, we definitely need an upgrade in enforcement. But I think when we say lack of enforcement, we're talking about the guys who are doing it illegally. And this sounds more like it's going to come right back to the same guys who have been doing it legally all the time.
So I think this is, Mr. Chairman, if I might, this is Michelle. I think this is why we want to make sure we have another follow-up meeting so we can more thoroughly discuss, strategies that would meet this objective. It sounds like folks support the draft objective, but we want to make sure that the strategies, in other words, the how we would meet that objective are complete and reflect what the priorities are for St. Thomas and St. John.
All right, thank you for those comments. Colin?
I have to say I pretty much 100% agree with Ruth. Like the key to business success is basically marketing. And the key to any success with this whole thing is enforcement. And then with that being said, I mean, you can make as many rules as you want without any enforcement. It's just basically you're not going to get anywhere. So,
All right, thank you for your comments, Colin. Winston?
I concur with Daryl. I think, you got to make this more clear. When the enforcement officers go out, don't just attack the fishermen who are, every time they go out, not attack them, but I mean, board them and check them continuously. Either go after the guys that are illegally selling fish and catching fish, and hope to get a recreational quota in place, because I see a lot of recreational guys catching as much fish as us.
Julian, let me ask a question to Dr. Duvara. I believe that if we put a parenthesis after stakeholders and said commercial and recreational sector, as well as public in general, that will add a little bit of what has been said here about the not forgetting, that the recreational sector also needs to be managed through enforcement regulation that can be enforced, and also we need to include that group at all times. I believe that the main concern here is that all this enforcement is good whenever it's for commercial fisheries, but nothing is happening on other sectors that are needed also. Julian, do the group agree to include that? Here?
I agree.
Yes, I agree.
Great, so I've captured that here. So any other feedback or thoughts on this objective of ensuring that management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement?
This is Nicole Angeli, turn to speak.
Yes, go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. Along with coordination with NOAA OLE and USVI DPNR, I was hoping we could also include explicitly the US Coast Guard, because we don't have a properly executed joint enforcement agreement at this time due to the match requirements and enforcement on DPNR. So we're not able to fulfill our end of a JEA, but I don't think that should penalize us for support for US Coast Guard. I think it would help support NOAA OLE and support US DPNR. So if everyone agrees, I think that would be an important explicit point to make.
Thank you very much for those comments. Yes, go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, that's perfectly okay, because I didn't want to say it, but in the case of Puerto Rico, Nicole is very right. We have on the memorandum of understanding with National Marine Fisheries Enforcement Office and the U.S. Coast Guard. So The other thing is that you have 1 hour, so probably we should have sort of a motion. So when people agree, and you go for a motion, then we move to the next one, and we go through each one of them. And then we can come back for any questions you may have, or you want to review any of this before you finish.
Okay, before I go for the motion, I want to put on the record that Gregory Lede is on the call, but his audio for him speaking is presently not working, and he is trying to fix that problem, but he can hear everything that we are saying, and he can text me directly if he has comments. So Gregory Lede is on the call.
Excellent.
All right, so can someone make a motion so we can move forward with this first item?
I make a motion. Do I need to read it, Miguel, or? Miguel?
Just to say that
I need-
the motion will be to accept the language of the first objective as written on the screen. And that includes the modification that you just made, commercial and recreational fisheries, parentheses, and also to add the U.S. Coast Guard in the top part. So you can
Yeah,
say,
I make that.
so the motion will be to accept the language of the first objective as written on the screen.
I make a motion to accept the language with the modification to add the U.S. Coast Guard and commercial and recreational fisheries in the last section, to accept the language written on the screen.
I second the motion.
Second by whom?
This is Elizabeth Caddison. I second the motion.
Thank you.
All in favor? Is there any noes or any abstentions?
Then the motion carries.
The motion carries, not hearing any noes or abstentions.
Then, Mr.
All
Chairman,
right, we
as-
move on
as
to item
suggest-
number 2, Miguel.
Yes, as suggested by Ruth, from now on, you just continue the same way.
I lost you there for a minute, Miguel.
Okay, for the second one, what we are saying on the screen and for the record is that the draft management objective is collaborate with domestic and international partners to promote adaptive and efficient management that considers diverse community interests. The potential strategies will be to review and evaluate the effectiveness of existing seasonal and area closures, reduce bycatch and waste through gear modification and seasonal restrictions, collaborate with DPNR to develop consistent management measures where appropriate, ensure measures accommodate St. Thomas and John local ecosystem, and participate in WCAPC and CARICOM efforts to improve understanding and management of Caribbean-wide resources. Here, what you are telling the council is that they should consider in any national or domestic meetings the concerns of the St. Thomas and John group in this potential strategy. It's open for discussion.
Okay, well, with that said, I wanna make a comment because, you know, we put all of these measures in place once again, and we don't come back and doing stock assessments or looking at what we have put in place. And you know, when we did the seasonal closures back in 2004, 2005, it clearly stated in the SFA amendment that sometimes seasonal closures do more harm than good to a fishery. And it's been 15 years and we haven't revisited any of these stocks to see what's going on. And I know in a couple of the groups that I feel that we are doing more damage than good. Now that you're protecting all of these big groupers have multiplied and been multiplying for 15 years and eating all the small fish them now. And then also some of these seasonal closures, the fish can't go back down. So, you know, that's something that really needs to be looked at.
So Julian,
Miss-
you agree then with the first line, which is to review and evaluate the effectiveness of existing seasonal and area closures?
Yes, I agree. I agree with that, but it needs to happen like now. We've been saying so for the last 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that, but our now in geological times for the council, but I believe that what you're saying is that we should make a point, the strategic plan, of the urgency to review and evaluate the effectiveness of the seasonal.
Yes.
Urgently, probably we should do add the word urgently at the end.
Yes.
To capture, I like a sub to capture Julian's concern here.
And so Julian, I can, you know, I'm going to take your input. I'm going to, review these potential
Can you
strategies.
put your name to the record?
Oh, I'm
Put
sorry.
your name in the record.
This is Michelle Duval. So
Okay.
when I take your feedback and review these, and again, we'll set up another meeting so that you all can review these, potential draft strategies again to make sure they're complete, and to add anything else that is necessary. I'll rework this language to indicate the urgency of this, and you'll see other potential strategies that also speak to this need to review the effectiveness of the seasonal and area closures, and make sure that we have the appropriate data and science for those species that are affected by those closures.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth Cattison, anything to comment?
Yeah, I think I gave a little talk at a Fisheries Management Council last year that we have looked at the effectiveness of the Gramonic Bank just in regards to the Nassau grouper. Also, we published a paper a couple of years ago about the yellowfin grouper on the Gramonic Bank, and how the closure of the bank for spawning, as well as probably seasonal closure for the large groupers, has affected the grouper population. That's not, speaking to their food or other fish species. That's a much tougher, research question. Although our populations of Nassau grouper look like they're rebounding, they're still nowhere near they were historically. That, again, nobody's done the research to see if prey species have changed over the last 15 years because of the large groupers. It's kind of a difficult, it's difficult, and it takes a while to really get at that. So I agree that absolutely agree that closures should be, the effectiveness should be continually, researched and addressed. But it's not a real overnight. It's not an overnight thing. It takes a long time to actually get at that.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Just to follow up on that, thank you for that, Ms.
I was
Cattison.
just going to call you.
I think what the guys are saying here, I totally understand what you're saying, but what they're saying.
Name for the record. Name for the record.
This is Gilbert Laban speaking. I appreciate what you said, Ms. Cattison or Dr. Cattison, but I think what the guys are saying here is that they want to see a timeline. They want to see, you guys have essentially, these areas have been closed. Now we want to see a timeline of when you're going to conduct the research and see what the research says. So I think that's what they're asking for. We are asking for, I should say.
Yeah, Elizabeth Cattison again. I appreciate that, and I think our focus has been on the groupers themselves, and have these management. Can we bring back, the larger groupers that have been fished out pretty much across the Caribbean. Can we bring those back here in the U.S. Virgin Islands? And I think that we've had pretty good, signs that things are that we can. Probably a more interesting question even than that is what's going to be, what's going to happen when we bring back big predators again. And again, it's something that we have not addressed, and I think I agree. We should now start looking at that, and research takes money. It takes grant funding, and so but it's certainly something that should be done. I agree with you.
Again, this is Gilbert. To that point, I think you just nailed something big on the head that I had a question about. I think it relates to the topic before, and I'm not going to go back to that, but you just said funding. And I don't know where in any of this do we address, I know a lot of it has to come from our local government. I know some people may laugh because we know the condition of our government and their funding right now, but is there any way to earmark or help or grants out there to help with the funding in both these issues or all of these issues at hand? Or how do we address that in this objective, in these objectives?
If I may, funding is the ever-present issue. And here, what we need to do is to go over each one of the objectives, make sure that we include them in the potential strategy. But we taking in consideration the last two comments, that's something that we should be present at all times. So when you, the chairman, give your presentation at the next meeting, please take note of this. We cannot include the funding in a specific objective, but we do include a line in everything that we do that we should knock on the doors of the people who have money to pay attention to the needs of the U.S. Caribbean. And right now, that's something that, there are two presidential executive orders that address this in a way. But at this time, we don't want to deviate to the discussion here because we only have until 12:30. What we need to see if you agree or not that the language under each one of the objectives capture the needs of the area, St. Thomas and John. And I believe that this first line, review and evaluate the effectiveness of existing seasonal area closure as soon as possible, includes identification of the areas of the species that we need to address. We need to also talk about possibilities, and I mean at the council level, possibilities of funding for achieving this goal and objective that we're discussing at this time. So, Mr. Chairman, the question that we really have here is that have we captured the concern, the suggestions of the St. Thomas and John under this draft management objective?
Well, that's what I'm going to ask. That's what I'm going to ask the group. Does anyone else want to make a comment on this subject? This is your opportunity. It's not your last opportunity, but say your name and make your comment.
Ruth Gomez, I guess this is just a question I have for Miguel. The last sentence says to participate in WCAFC and CARICOM efforts to improve understanding and management of the Caribbean-wide resources. Both WCAFC and CARICOM are two councils. CARICOM has 15. WCAFC has
we're losing you, Ruth. We're losing you. Can you repeat?
Yeah, we can't hear Ruth. There's a lot of wind.
CARICOM and WCAFC are two councils or two commissions that the United States is not a member. CARICOM has 15 countries in the Caribbean, and WCAFC has from all over the world. So I guess my question is, to become a member of these, you have to be a country. So are the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico going to ask for membership to CARICOM and WCAFC?
No, that WCAFC, United States is a member of WCAFC. CARICOM is, as you know, the Caribbean community, which are not members.
Correct.
They have 9 countries and they have other observers for a total of 17 under the CRFM Caribbean Fishery Management Mechanism. So the way we do it, you have participated in some of the meetings of the working groups, is that the United States called for, in this case, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, but they call for any state to participate in international delegations. So yes, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands cannot be part of, directly part of WCASI because we have to go to the United States. However, the question that we have here is if and when we participate in any deliberation, the DAP would like for the United States to consider the effectiveness of seasonal closures, closed seasons, the bycatch, weights of gear, etc. The reason for that and the rationale is, and since the beginning of the 70s, is that it doesn't matter what you do downstream, it's upstream, people are not complying with anything. For example, if we don't have a management approach to protect the NASA groupers in every country, then you are protecting the NASA grouper here, but if nobody is doing it in other countries, the NASA grouper will disappear. And that's exactly what is happening, by the way. So that's the objective that we have here, that make sure that the United States take in consideration Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands features concern and the local government concern whenever these issues are addressed at these meetings. And sometimes what we do is that we ask the delegation of the United States to help us bring the participation of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. That's when sometimes what they do is that they invite the Secretary of Puerto Rico Department of Natural Resources and the Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources in the Virgin Islands to send a delegate to this meeting. And in the past, Ruth herself, as the division chief, has participated, and the commissioner and other people in the past also participated. So what we have here, this is not a light issue, is to make sure that whenever we have participation of the United States in any of these meetings, that the concerns of the local fishers and participants of the district advisory panels are included in those discussions.
Thank you, Miguel.
You're welcome, Ruth. That was a good point.
Yeah, it's a very concerning point that we have been discussing amongst a group of us, because we have some great concerns with CAPC especially, and them setting rules that would eventually or somehow fit in and affect us with where we already don't have enough rules. So it's something that we're paying very close attention to.
Yes. So do we agree with this, or do we need to add something else so Michelle can redraft the section?
And so again, this is Michelle, Mr. Chairman. I think this is great conversation. I've been taking notes, and when we schedule our follow-up meeting to really review, these strategies, and that will be another opportunity to add to those, as long as we can make sure that we're getting, this objective right, as Miguel said. That's important.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments they would like to make?
Well,
if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Julian, before you get into the motion, probably the language here should be to participate in international fora, such as WCASI and CARICOM, because there are many others, SPOT protocol and others. So Michelle, maybe we can put a note here, participate in other fora, such as WCASI and CARICOM.
That makes sense.
And instead of CARICOM, we should say CRFM, because we cannot participate in CARICOM directly. And then rather than CARICOM, we should say CRFM.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we adopt the language or the language as is with the modification in language international forums such as we have and CRFM.
I need a second.
I second that motion. Gilbert Laban.
All right. Motion made by Ruth Gomez, second by Gilbert Laban. Anyone in opposition? Any abstentions? With that said, the motion carries. Before we move on to the next item, just want to make a statement to my group is you guys need to speak up, please, and don't leave it for Ruth always or myself to do the speaking. I need everyone to do the speaking, make different motions because it makes it seem like it's the same group of people making the motions all the time. Anyone can second, but we need people to step up and make the motions, nothing to be afraid about. So please, my group, let's help Ruth out and let's keep the ball rolling. Thank you. Next item, Miguel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is to consider the potential impacts of climate change on the efficacy of management measures. Potential strategies use ecosystem status reports to inform development of management measures, evaluate fishery independent information for climate-related impacts and trends, solicit fisher input regarding climate-related changes in species and habitats.
I have a question. This is Ruth Gomez for the record.
You have a question for?
Go ahead, Ruth.
Yes, for Dr. Duval. Evaluate fishery independent information for climate-related impacts and trends. What fishery independent information?
So I know that there are some efforts by the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, and I think there's other pieces of fishery independent information that have been collected in the past, and that the Science Center is working to try to establish, I think, some fishery independent surveys throughout the U.S. Virgin Islands. So that's a type of fishery independent information. You may not have all the fishery independent information that you would like right now, but I think this was included as a potential strategy, for when you have that information. There's also existing studies that academic research scientists have done that could also contribute to such evaluations as well. Again, these are just meant to be examples. These are not set in stone.
So here's my concern. This is Ruth again. For years and years, I've been a part of this fishery process for 35 plus years. And through during those 35 years, I have repeatedly heard that the Virgin Islands is data deficient, right? So my concern in anything that we're doing here today and moving forward is I have no problem, right, in implementing a management strategy, provided there's good science to back it up, and not implement it because it's what we think we should do or what, we're told to do. So whatever it is, whatever we're going to do, for me, and I want to state this for everyone to hear, I am not in favor of doing anything unless there's good science behind of it. And when I asked a question about fishery independent information, it is exactly what I thought in my mind. You just confirmed it for me, Dr. Duval. It's not as good as we would want it to be. So we really, really need to pay attention to the language we have here. Julian, Darrell, you guys know that we've had language come back to bite us in the past. So let's make sure, and I'm not trying to be confrontational, I'm just trying to make sure that we protect our fishery moving forward and not end up with language that, and it has happened in the past, where we say, oh, we're gonna do this, but then we really don't have the science to back it up. And we're trying to shove a square in a circle. So
Ruth,
that's my,
Ruth, the 3 lines that we have here, would you like to modify them? Remember, these are draft potential strategy. You can delete this, you can change it any way you want, but taking into consideration your present comment, will you change any of the language that you have here to make it more straightforward according to your concerns?
yeah, as long as there's language in there that says, as long, something to the degree like it's supported with, an adequate data set or data or something to that degree. Because I don't want, Miguel, for instance, the fishery independent information, just having been at Fish and Wildlife, I know how we faltered to try and get CMAP done. And CMAP is the Southeast Fisheries Independent, that's their monitoring program. And it's still limping along. I mean, it's a good program, but the truth of the matter is COVID, weather, mechanical, all this stuff doesn't allow us or allow Dr. Angeline now to collect the data maybe in the way she would want it to be. So let's just make sure that we put some language in there that says, provided that there is adequate data to support.
And this is Julian McGrath for the record. I want to comment on this also, because what I have seen from being part of the CEDA assessment process and part of the scientific and statistical panel for the council is that in many cases, studies that have been done or information that have been collected cannot be used because it was not collected in the correct manner. It was partially collected, and what that does is it leaves a room when the scientists are doing their assessments to determine if a stock has improved its status of health or if a stock is undergoing overfishing. What it does is it leaves a big margin open for the word that they use is uncertainty. And once that word uncertainty drops into the equation, it causes our annual catch limits to drop because it has left a window open. So we need this to be addressed. And I'd like to hear what my other commercial fishers, before we move forward, have to say on this also.
Julian, that also could be included, but it's not here. This objective is talking to climate change. So what can we say regarding climate change? We can move forward to another objective, and I come back to this one. And remember, we concentrate on climate change, because I agree with Ruth that most of the time we have this information doesn't take in consideration the actual landings that we have here, the conditions that we have here, and we have to be mindful of that. But in this case, what we're talking about is the climate change. For example, this use a consistent status report to inform development of management measures. I may want to add there, using the best available information from the U.S. Caribbean, not from other places, and sticking it here for us. So taking consideration what Ruth is saying and what you're saying, probably, although we are addressing climate change here, we should make a point of use a consistent report to inform development and management measures using that information. Something, you know.
Dr. Duval, not the Caribbean, from the US Virgin Islands.
No, but we have to use the
US Caribbean. I think
US Caribbean include Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands, but Puerto Rico has also the same problem. But in this case, we are talking about St. Thomas and John, so we can say US, Virgin Islands, St. Thomas and John area. St. Thomas and John. Just to hammer that the issue is really very important to the area that is covered by this DAP. And then remember, the council may merge, because if we have the same concern in Puerto Rico and St. Croix, then we can say US Caribbean, parentheses, Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. Does this capture a little bit, Ruth, what you were addressing before?
Hold on one second. I read it. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Because is that agreeable with the rest of the group? We can have a motion to move forward, because I don't want to let the two comments made by Julian and Ruth regarding the statistics here, which is addressing another part of the strategy plan.
Gilbert, you have any comments? Colin, you have any comments? Winston, Daryl, Gregory, Elizabeth Caddison? Any comments on this, please?
I don't have any comments right now on it. This is Gilbert Laban. Just one question though. As far as climate change, I know in the first sentence it mentions development, inform ecosystem status report to inform development of management resources. Now, is that talking about, when you say that, are you just the ecosystem in general? Is that based on not just water, but land-based development, management of trash, waste, that type of stuff? Is that all captured in this? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And just for the group, parallel to this, remember, we are including this in the draft, in the strategic plan. But the important part is that the group recommends the council to include this information using ecosystem models, using whatever you want to use, but use the best data from St. Thomas and John to address climate change in this area. That's what you're really saying here. So we need to move forward. So if you don't have any comments.
All right, can we entertain a motion?
This is Elizabeth Caddison. I make a motion that the objective be accepted as written with the modification of USVI St. Thomas, St. John ecosystem.
You need a second and then move forward.
Gregory Lede, just second the motion. Any abstentions? Any no's? If not,
I have a question.
all right, go ahead.
So evaluate fishery dependent information. Explain to me why fishery dependent information isn't in consideration.
Fishery independent.
I understand.
Yeah, but for climate change, you have the landings and all that to give you an indication. But for climate change, you need fishery independent data, because that's when you collect salinity, turbidity, oceanographic conditions, which is present or absent, temperature, which is very important. And that's what you need to address here. For example, one of the trends that we have seen through interview with fisher in the field, a couple of meetings, Dr. Tarsila, and they're working on this. But for example, specific instance was when Ruth took us around St. Croix, and Dr. Tarsila was able to interview Robert from St. Croix, a diver for many years fishing for lobster. And he said that he had seen changes along with his other fellow divers in the temperature rising in the areas where they used to fish for lobster. That caused the lobster to move further in deep water. And so much so that in the neoprene jacket that they use is to cover them from cold temperature. Now they have to open the jacket to let water in so they can cool themselves. And he was concerned that climate change is here and affecting the fishery in a way that was not seen before. And that's what this objective that we just went through captures.
Thank you, Miguel.
You're welcome. Next one, Mr. Chairman, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion carries, we move forward.
Thank you. The next one is support development of accurate, timely, and cost-effective data collection, reporting, and monitoring program. Potential strategy, and this is when we need to capture what we were saying before. Support our fisheries and U.S. Department of Planning and Natural Resources efforts to improve recreational reporting and establish an MRIP, monitoring recreational information program survey in St. Thomas and John. Support Saudi Fisheries Science Center effort to work with DPNR to design, implement a multi-mode catch sampling program, prioritize data collection for species subject to seasonal and area closure, and support USVI effort to examine licenses modifications.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Michelle. If I might just add a little bit. So, licensing.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Licensing modifications was one of your, territorial licensing requirements was one of the priorities that you all had noted, and licensing is a way to improve fishery dependent information like catch monitoring and reporting. And then also, I just wanted to note that, a few of these potential strategies, and again, you'll have an opportunity to review these in greater detail and contribute more at our follow-up meeting, also came from, the presentation that Kevin McCarthy gave, I think it was at your June meeting, with respect to, all of the different activities that the Science Center is involved in throughout the region. So I tried to capture some of that stuff here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duval. Anyone have any comments on this item, objective? Additions, suggestions? I know presently right now, in the St. Thomas, St. John district, and also the St. Croix district, they're reviewing the whole process of the licenses and everything. So that's being looked at right now and making sure that it's all sound and well. So I know that's taking place right now. I think one of the most important things that needs to happen is a recreational license, because we're seeing what the commercial guys are doing, but we're not seeing what the recreational guys are doing. Anyone else have any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Elizabeth Caddison. I agree with Julian. I think especially now that the BVI's is closed, we have all these people here. We have it seems like our local population on the water is really increased over the last year, 6 months here. And I agree that we need to find out what's going on with the recreational fishery as well as the commercial.
Hello.
Any other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we leave the language that is here right now.
I make a motion, this is Ruth Gomez for the record. I make a motion that we adopt the language with the one modification of the word improvements and to accept the language as is on the screen.
Nicole Angeli, I second the motion.
All right, we take a vote. Does anybody have any more questions? If not, anyone abstain or anyone has a no answer? Not hearing any, the motion carries. Next on the agenda, Miguel. Next item.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michelle. I can read it if Miguel is having problems.
Okay, you may go right ahead.
I'm back, but Michelle is better at reading it. Go ahead, Michelle.
Go ahead,
Thank-
Dr. Duval.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next draft objective is promote fisher involvement and other collaborative research approaches to meeting island-specific science and information needs. And so the potential strategies include collaborate with science partners to develop and prioritize a St. Thomas, St. John specific list of research needs, prioritize and involve fishers in stock assessments for species subject to seasonal and area closures, encourage collaborative studies on effectiveness of Granitic Bank and other closed areas, work with the Southeast Fisheries Science Center to identify key species for which fishers could assist in obtaining biological samples, support joint Southeast Fisheries Science Center, DPNR, National Park Service efforts to improve information for data limited stock assessments, for example, gear selectivity studies in St. Thomas and St. John.
This is Ruth.
Go ahead, Ruth.
The first sentence, I would like to see collaborate with science partners and fishers to develop and prioritize a St. Thomas, St. John specific list of needs.
Anything else, Julian, before we proceed?
I would like to change the word encourage to urgent, where it says prioritize and involve fishers in stock assessments for species subject to seasonal closures and area closures. Instead of having it encourage, I like to see that that's very urgent.
So
It needs to happen.
The
It needs to happen.
encourage, and Mr. Chairman, encourage was part of the next potential strategy, which was encourage collaborative studies on the effectiveness of Granitic Bank. So was the urgent.
Well, I would like to add, I would like to add that then. Okay, I would like to add that urgent after closures.
Okay.
Yes, that's perfect.
Michelle, it's 10 to 12. The chair can go until maybe 15, half an hour later. Do we think that we can be able to finish, or do we need to continue this in another meeting? How you would like to proceed? Because right now we need a motion to to have this one, Mr. Chairman, and then we can discuss how we proceed for the rest of the time.
Okay, well, if no one has any more comments on this, this item objective here, I'll entertain a motion so we can move forward.
Gilbert LeBron here. And oh, somebody wanted to make a comment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Matthew.
This is Gilbert LeBron. I make a motion to move ahead with the amendments to the sentence collaborated with science partners and fishers, develop and prioritize the St. Thomas, St. John specific list of research needs, and move forward with also the amendment to an area closures needed urgently.
I said.
I think Ruth Gomez second the motion. Is that correct?
That's
Yes,
correct.
Mhm.
Okay, anyone has any other comments? If not, take a vote. Anyone abstain or anyone has a no answer? If not, this motion carries, and now we go back to what Miguel said about asking Dr. Duval about if we can finish or we need to continue at another meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, my suggestion might be that what we do is see if we can get through these draft objectives and perhaps save comments on the potential strategies for the meeting that we plan to have specifically on, the development of strategies and making sure that we have the language right and, all of the right strategies at the follow-up meeting that I talked about that we would like to have in early June. I don't know how you and the rest of the committee feel about that, but I would suggest if we can get through as many of the rest of these objectives, we can review the strategies and say, hey, this is an example, but does this objective capture everything that is it broad enough to capture the things we might want to include under here?
So in other words, Julian, we can go ahead and read for the record the color language. That will be one of the objectives. And then we will send to each one of you copies of this slide. So you will be ready for the next meeting in June to go over the strategic potential strategies. So that way, Michelle can continue working on this.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so Michelle, can you go and what we could do is for Michelle to go and read for the record, for example, what we're seeing here, the two objectives, and then you can have a motion to accept them or not, or modify them if you need to modify any of the objectives, rather than concentrated in the nitty-gritties of the potential strategy. And then for the June meeting, we go strategy by strategy under each one of the objectives.
Okay.
So Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Miguel. So now we're moving into the draft ecosystem and resource health objectives. So as I mentioned before, the first draft objective is implement the fishery ecosystem plan as a roadmap for future council actions to maintain the ecological relationships, roles, and services of the St. Thomas and St. John Island ecosystem. You're welcome to, look through these potential strategies, which again involve similar things like collaborating with science partners and stakeholders to, identify gaps and improve local biological and ecosystem information for St. Thomas and St. John. Again, evaluating the existing, closures and closed areas to determine contributions to ecosystem integrity, establish a process for incorporating ecosystem information and approaches into management measures for St. Thomas and St. John, and considering ecosystem approaches that are responsive to climate change. So again, as Miguel mentioned, if this objective, review this objective, and if there are any suggestions to the language of the objective, please let me know, and we'll review the strategies at our next meeting.
Anyone has any comments?
So we need a motion to accept these two objectives as written on the screen.
The next objective is identify, manage, and protect coral reef and other fishery resource habitats of St. Thomas and St. John. And in terms of the potential strategies there, Mr. Chairman, this encompasses all of the discussion that you all talked about with respect to impacts of habitats from coastal development, erosion and sedimentation, and other forms of pollution that impact St. Thomas and St. John habitats. And additional strategies to develop outreach materials to address these things and educate the public and ensure that the council's essential fish habitat designations account for those ecological roles and relationships of species. So I think with that, if there are any changes to either of the two objectives, I'd be happy to record those.
Anyone has any comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I guess the only thing,
We lost you, Gilbert.
you heard me. This is Gilbert. I just to add to this, somewhere in between here would be education as well. But overall, I agree with everything here.
So just in general, Gilbert, add education as make sure education as a strategy is added in there.
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
need that.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Julian, since people are kind of timid with motion, probably what we could do is that the U.S. chairman can say if there are no objection, we agree to accept these two objectives with the language as modified in case they have been modified. And you can go forward for the next 2 or 3.
Anyone have any objections? Anyone wants to vote against it? All right. So we move to the next objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these are the last 3 objectives under ecosystem and resource health. So the first one is encourage efforts to create and rehabilitate fishery resource habitats that support ecosystem structure and function. So this speaks to the conversation you all had about the relationship between habitat destruction and creation and rehabilitation. So there are several potential strategies there about opportunities for funding through marine debris removal and identifying like St. Thomas and St. John habitat restoration needs with NOAA's Office of Habitat Conservation. The next objective is collaborate with management partners to address enforcement concerns that may affect ecological relationships. So, again, speaking to your priority and conversation about the impacts of enforcement on resource health. And then the last objective is collaborate with science partners to identify and address ecological data and information gaps. I think you all have already spoken about that earlier today, both you and Ms. Gomez.
But I think in the first one where it says work with federal and territorial management partners, that should also say and stakeholders to identify opportunities for habitat enhancement.
Got it.
Anyone has any comments on any of them?
If there's no comment, can we move forward for the other 3?
This is Ruth. This is Ruth. Just from my years at Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife receives money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do artificial reefs. So rather than pigeonhole ourselves with NOAA and their marine debris removal program, we need to open it up where we can work with, I know it says work with federal and territorial management partners, but then we get very specific to NOAA. I think we need to make sure that we allow ourselves the opportunity to work with other federal agencies and more specifically Fish and Wildlife Service, because they have artificial reef money. You never have too much money.
Ruth, this is Michelle. Does this help address it? I added USFWS and other federal agencies.
Yes, that's perfect. So I make a motion that we adapt the language on the screen with the insert of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and other federal agencies to the language.
Skill Laban, I second that motion.
Any abstentions? Any noes? All right, motion carries. Next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the draft social, cultural, and economic objectives. So there are 4 of them. There's 2 on the screen and 2 on the next screen. The first is promote the collection of social and economic data that informs management decisions. So this speaks to your priority that there's a lack of social and economic data. So, this includes strategies to engage science partners and the SSC to identify and prioritize what those data gaps are. Working with Sea Grant, and perhaps other agencies, as Ruth indicated earlier, to ensure that those social economic research priorities are incorporated in other funding opportunities, and as well as using results from existing or completed impact studies here. And then the other one is the second objective on the screen is evaluate the social, cultural, and economic impacts of management decisions and actions across user groups. So, this includes things like documenting the social and economic impacts of the existing closed seasons and spawning areas on, all sectors of the fishery, and that management measures acknowledge and address differences across the fishing communities of St. Thomas and St. John.
Anyone has any comments? With no comments heard.
I make a motion to accept these 2 objectives as is.
I second Ruth Gomez.
All right, any abstentions or anyone that says no? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these last 2 objectives, the first is promote efforts that support social and economic opportunity and stability across sectors and fishing communities. So this speaks to the conversations that you all had about improving fishing infrastructure in St. Thomas and St. John, including landing and market sites. You also talked about using social media in this time of COVID to marketing locally caught species. And, the point has also been made by other management partners that, addressing recreational fishing opportunity and satisfaction might be something also to include. The next objective is consider the impacts of enforcement and illegal fishing on economic opportunity and social well-being. And so again, this speaks to your concerns about how enforcement might be in illegal harvest could be impacting economic opportunity for people who are, obeying the laws, basically.
Anyone with comments?
I make a motion that we adopt the language on the screen as is.
I second that motion, Gilbert Levon.
Any abstentions? Any noes? With that said, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, as Miguel has noted, we'll email this presentation out to everybody so that you can take a closer look at these and think about, other potential strategies that you might want included or modifications to these for our meeting in June. I did just quickly want to run through the draft communication and outreach objectives. All of the DAPs had a lot of conversation about communication and outreach. And so this first objective is use a variety of communication tools that consider the social, cultural, and economic characteristics of target audiences. So this speaks to strategies like continue to use the council's social media platforms, as well as exploring other things like WhatsApp and email templates, developing a catalog of communities that have a need and preference for traditional media tools, utilizing the council's website, coordinating, ensuring that our communication outreach materials account for stakeholder language preferences, coordinating with other management partners and other organizations to just, get the word out about what the council's doing. And, one of the things that came in from the comment box was like sector specific and boat friendly communication materials. So that's just a suite. So I just want to see if there's any comments on this particular objective.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Last week, the council's outreach and education committee met. And I'll say it again for everyone on this call to hear. I don't think the council could do it any better than they're doing it now. Christina, that handles the social media for the council, does an impeccable job at handling the council's social media. So I think somewhere in here that we need to really be specific because we always need to make sure that we're singing from the same sheet of music, that we need to make sure that we are specific in language to the OEAP. Because I don't want us to go in two different directions. I think the OEAP has established itself and does such a great job that we need to make sure that we continue to, work hand in hand with them. So is there any way we can insert the OEAP in here?
Thank you, Ruth, for that comment. So yes, and I guess all of these potential strategies are with the OEAP in mind, and the OEAP also reviewed all of those different communication items and provided comment and actually, prioritize some of those things. So this actually incorporates OEAP input. And then I'm also going to turn to Miguel because, we are going to circulate this to the OEAP, these objectives, and then, all of these potential strategies for their further documentation and input. But I agree, I think Christina and the OEAP do an amazing job. And part of the goal here is to capture what they already do so that, it is documented and we can see it's evident and that the rest of the public knows, the amazing job that they're doing and all the tools that they're exploring.
I believe that if we add at the end of the line that's the characteristics of target audiences, we can set in coordination with the outreach and education panel of the CFMC.
This is Ruth again. I really need to see OEAP in this.
Yeah, that's
I
what I'm
understand
saying.
this is all that they do, but I need to see OEAP. Because sitting on the OEAP, our stakeholders, the government, all the it has a full onslaught of representation. So to make sure that there's no guessing and somebody doesn't decide, 3 years from now they want. No, thank you.
I totally agree with Ruth. It's one of the most important pieces.
Because right now you have social media or information being put out on social media that is wrong. Sharks that were found only in the Pacific are said to be found in the Virgin Islands. And there's a whole onslaught of issues with what's being put out there. And that's because you have somebody else doing something. So I need to make sure that we are all funneling through the OEAP. You don't break something if you don't fix something that's not broken. And the OEAP is not broken.
Yeah, I agree also with Ruth, but I believe that Dr. Duval has captured your concern when she added in coordination with the OAP. In other words, we never would do any of this communication to etc. without consulting with the OAP first. And I'm 100% with that too. So everybody else agree with Ruth and Julian's comment and the language that have been added by Dr. Duval at this time?
Yes.
I believe by the signs, either people are hungry or they all agree. So, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'll entertain a motion and we can move forward quickly.
I make a motion that we adopt the language, modified language with the insert of the language in coordination with the OEAP and accept the rest of the language as is.
I second the motion, Elizabeth Gaddison.
Any abstentions or any noes? With that said, we move forward. Motion moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just this and one more, promote participation of a variety of stakeholders in the council process. So there's a lot of conversation about the fact that we want to try to encourage additional participation in the council process, that a lot of times, many fishers are relying on you all to only be the people participating in the council process. So how can we make people feel more comfortable participating in that process? And so this talks about increasing the frequency of communications to serve as reminders, already making use of the traditional and social media tools that the council uses, continuing to expand the use of webinars and other online opportunities for access and participation and even education, ensuring that meetings are scheduled to encourage maximum participation, even things like considering the development of issue-specific online comment forms. And again, as Miguel said, this will all be in coordination with the OEAP, and the OEAP is going to be reviewing these.
Well, I think one of the most important, I think this is Julian. I think one of the most important things here that we need to ensure is we spoke about the mentorship program, and we have some young fishermen that just got into the fishery. And I think it's very, very important that we get them involved in the process that's going on, because they need to understand that it takes time. Some of us who've been involved have been involved for 15 plus years, and we have some newcomers, and then we have the young fishers, and we really, really need to get them to attend some of the meetings, see and understand what's going on. Because what happens most of the time, you throw a whole bunch of acronyms out there, and they're like, "What? I don't understand what's going on." Then a new rule is put in place, and it's like, why? But if we get them involved from the beginning, as they grow in the fishery, they will become part of the management process like we have, and they will understand and be able to speak to their peers and future fishermen.
That's a very good point. I believe that Dr. Duval is adding on the last line. So please check if that captures what Julian is stating at this time.
Yes, anyone else want to make some comments? This is the chance.
I have a comment. This is Ruth.
Go ahead, Ruth.
In reading this line, it's all electronic. Somewhere in here, we need to mention the liaison, because that is the individual that you're going to rely on to do those in-person contact. And regardless, I mean, the new normal, yes, we're going to do a lot of things electronically, but you never ever get rid of in-person contact. So we need to mention the liaison in here, because those individuals are very important when it comes to person-to-person contact.
Ruth, this is Michelle. So I'm going to move to the next objective, because that's where all of that liaison conversation that you all talked about is captured, is in the improving stakeholder understanding and awareness of fisheries management and current issues in the council process. So that's the whole outreach objective. So that's where I included all the liaison stuff.
My bad.
Do you mean to move to the other slide, Michelle? We
Yeah,
can come back to this one and then compare the two.
So this is improve public and stakeholder understanding and awareness of fisheries management, current issues in the council process. So this is really focused on the outreach activities that the council conducts and supports. So the council already does a lot of non-traditional stakeholder outreach, with restaurants, but expanding to small scale grocery store owners, et cetera. Continue support of the Marine Resource Education Program, developing outreach approaches and materials specific to recreational anglers so they understand what's going on. This is expanding the role of fisheries liaisons to improve both fisher and public understanding of fisheries issues in the council process. And so some of those specific activities that you all mentioned that could be included as part of an implementation plan would be like the meetings that the liaisons might have in conjunction with a member of one of the DAPs at, like a market site. You all had spoken about that. This is also where clarity and simplicity of presentations to improve public understanding is, partnering with other organizations like PEPCO and Sea Grant and federal agencies to develop and distribute our educational materials, conducting in-person outreach workshops to improve fisher and public engagement. And then also one of the things that came up was exploring partnerships with organizations to capture traditional ecological knowledge of U.S. Caribbean fishing communities.
So Ruth, when we have these two, one after the other, that include your concerns?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because in that case, Mr. Chairman, we can then ask the group if they agree with these two last objectives, and then we set for the next item in the agenda and other business, and also for the record, I state again that we are going to have another meeting probably in June to go through this. And here I have a question for all of you. If we are going to do a thorough job here, we need more time. first, we are going to send to you the slides that have been presented here so people can come prepare for the meeting. And second, probably we need more than 2 hours just to go through one thing. There will be only one item in the agenda. So that's sort of a question. And the other ones, if we want to encourage everybody to participate, because if somebody from March comes here, I only have 4 voices in the DAP. The rest of the people are quiet. So sometimes you're quiet because you agree with everything. Sometimes you're quiet because you don't care. Sometimes you're quiet because of other reasons. But the thing is that Julian and I, we've been talking all the time, how can we promote best participation so just for the next meeting, and this is human nature, we all know that. But for the next meeting, please be prepared. So when the chair goes around the round robin with each member, you all can participate. And I believe that we will have a better meeting. So the last part here is these two. Do we have a motion to adopt?
I'll entertain a motion. I'll entertain a motion to move forward with these 2 objectives and the communication and outreach
as modified.
As modified.
I make a motion to accept the language with the modification. We got to go back to the other, there we go. With the insert of the language, expand, improve participation by new and young fishers in the council process, and accept the other language as is.
Thanks, Shepard.
I second
Need
that
a second?
motion, Gilbert Lamont.
Any abstentions? Any noes? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle, anything else that you have that you need at this time?
No, Mr. Chairman and Miguel, thank you so much, everybody, for all of your input. As Miguel said, we'll be emailing a copy of this presentation around to everybody with the changes so that you can see what was modified. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Now we have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duval. That was excellent. You're a very good presenter, and you have everything well put together. So I think we move to the next item on the agenda now, Miguel.
Yes, other business. You wanted to talk about the bacon and probably candidates that the members can submit.
Yes. So right now, presently, we have an empty seat, and I was notified by Diana that we have an empty seat on the committee that needs to be filled. And I'm open up for suggestions to fill that seat. So, if anyone knows of a fisher that they would like to see on the committee, this is the opportunity. If they can please put that name forward, and then I will present it at the council meeting in April for it to be voted on by the council members. So I'm open up right now for a name or names.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Do we have a representative from John on this committee?
Yes, we do. The representative was Joshua Borg. I think that's how we say his last name, from Just Fish. And I tried to reach out to him. He's normally on the meeting. He was on the last meeting, and he was actually a good speaker there, but did not get any response at this meeting. And I sent him an email and I did text him.
Okay. I would like to suggest Joshua Kittel for consideration, and here's my reason why. This gentleman is young. He's very enthusiastic. He shows a lot of potential, and I think in encouraging young people or young fishers to get involved in this process, I think we sort of all the boxes with Joshua. So I would like to
submit Joshua Kittel's name, if he's interested, to be a member on this committee.
All right, thank you for your suggestion.
Julian?
Yes,
Hi, this is Elizabeth Caddison. I'm not going to suggest anyone else, but I have worked with Josh Cattell. He and I could not agree with Rick more. He's a great kid and he's very involved in the fishery, and I think he's going to be there a long time. So I agree with Ruth on that person.
all right, thank you. Anyone else? Not hearing anything else? You all can always call me and give you a suggestion. If not, I will be presenting Joshua's name at the April 28, 29 council meeting as the replacement for Claude Berry and the committee.
Excuse me, can I have Joshua's last name, Julian?
Quetel, Queetl. I'll send you all his information. I have all his information because he's also helping us out with a lot of other stuff.
Thank you.
Great.
He's very, very interested in everything that's going on, and every time we have a meeting, I tell him about a meeting and he always asks questions and everything. So he's a good young man. He's one of them that we really need to mentor, and I want to mentor all of them so I can get a break.
That's that's great.
A couple other items. This committee also will be having a meeting on April 19th. And at that meeting, it will be at the same time, starting at 10 o'clock to noon. And what we will be discussing at that meeting would be the eco-based conceptual models. So it gives you guys time to prepare for that meeting. Of course, I will send you all 100 reminders like I did for this meeting, so you guys can attend. Is there anything else, Miguel?
No, that's it, Mr. Chairman. Everything went very well. I thank you all.
And I thank you all for attending, each and every one of you, especially for the support of Miguel and his team, and Dr. Duval for such an excellent presentation, which makes it easy to follow and understand. And all those who participated in speaking up, I am happy that you did. And like Miguel said, I look forward to everyone at the April meeting bringing your voice out there and your concerns. This is our fishery, and if we don't look out for it, no one is going to look out for it for us. So this is our opportunity. With that said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, you don't need a second for that. Just go ahead.
Yep.
And
Thank you very much, everyone, again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.